Thank you all for staying with us here today for this very important topic. We've talked a lot already today about insurance, and so I'm very pleased now to moderate this panel of some of Cape May County's finest insurance representatives. Our first speaker will be Tom Heist from the Heist Insurance Agency in Ocean City. He joined his father in the family business in 1991 after working for an insurance company in New York. And the business has 4 locations: Ocean City, Margate, Marmora, and Egg Harbor Township. Tom, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I think flood insurance has been so exhaustively covered. I'm going to move into the Affordable Care Act. All right. We're going to do this quickly because a lot of what I think the three of us have to say have already been covered. We're all independent agents, which means we represent many insurance companies, many products. We're a little bit different than a State Farm or Allstate, where they sell for one carrier. We sell for many. We all insure both inland business and coastal business. I thought we were pretty good at flood insurance, but when you settle 3,600 claims, you get better. You read the policy over and over and over, and you learn really that a lot of the claims stuff is really not in the policy. It's how they do business. And that was kind of the hard part, I think, for me, and I'm sure for Tom and Bill as well. So I'm going to cover very quickly some Sandy and flood facts, some definitions, talk about the maps and elevation certificates, which have not been touched upon today, and then, in my opinion, talk about a little bit of the future. Sandy obviously was a big storm. How big? It was 1,000 miles wide. If you leave Ocean City and drive to Chicago, it's 829 miles. You got to drive another 3 hours to get to 1,000 miles. Pretty big. 1.5 million total claims, 800,000 in New Jersey and New York alone, 70 billion in total economic damage, 18 billion, almost 19 billion in insured loss, and the 4th largest loss in U.S. history. Interesting note, the top 3 states for flood losses since 1978, Louisiana at 16 billion, Texas 5.5 billion, and New Jersey comes in at 3rd at 5.3 billion. So this little tiny state ranks 3rd in the country. Biggert-Waters really was designed to bring the subsidized policies up to what they call a true risk rate. So what are the subsidized policies? Subsidized policies are those policies where the living space is below the base flood elevation. We'll get into that in a minute. But mostly, they're the pre-firm policies built before 12/31/74. I use 1175 because it's easier to remember than 12/31/74. So how many policies nationwide do we have of pre-firm policies? There's 5.5 million flood policies, 1.1 million are pre-firm, 20%. So 20% of the people may get rate increases. Atlantic County, there's 31,000 policies, of which 13.6 are pre-firm. 43% in Atlantic County are pre-firm policies. Cape May County, 55,000 policies, of which 14,000 are pre-firm. So that's 26%. Little higher than the national average of 20%. So those policyholders can expect probably higher rates. Everyone else does not. So 4 out of 5 homeowners who have a flood policy will not see dramatic rate increases. I think that's something that's not covered in the news. Some other flood facts. All 50 states have floods. There's a 26% chance of experiencing a flood during your 30-year mortgage, which is 6 times higher than having a fire. Flood damage is never covered by the homeowner's policy. Somebody said that earlier. 25% of claims come outside of the high-risk flood areas, which means 75% come from the high-risk flood areas. The deficit prior to Sandy was $18 billion. And Sandy is going to be about a $7 or $8 billion loss. So at the end of the day, we're going to get to somewhere around, $23 to $25 billion, and that money will never get paid back. That's important. There's no one is saying let's bring flood back to whole. I think they're just trying to stop the bleeding in some way that is affordable and palatable for these homeowners. All right, some key definitions. What is a flood? It's rising water. I have people tell me their pipe burst in their attic and it came down, I had a flood. I said, well, flood is actually rising waters. You have falling waters. Falling waters is always covered under your homeowner's policy. Rising waters is not. That's excluded. Do you have a flood policy? So it's a general and temporary condition that affects 2 or more acres of normally dry land. So if you have a fire hydrant that only floods your property, you don't have a flood claim. Your neighbor needs to have that water damage as well. Pre-FIRM, we hear that word a lot. What does that mean? Pre-flood insurance rate map. FIRM, flood insurance rate map. Again, we talked about that being homes built before 75, 1175. Those are mostly the subsidized policies. What's also interesting to note is some of those homeowners, they weren't required to get an elevation certificate. They go out and get one, and they find out that their home is really higher than today's required base flood elevation. So they no longer pay a higher rate. They get the benefit of the post-FIRM rate, but they just never went out and got that elevation certificate because that's the tool that insurance agents use to develop a flood premium. So and I don't know what that number is, but there's more than you would think. What is an A zone? An A zone is wave action of less than 1.5 feet. Okay, sounds reasonable. A V zone is wave action greater than 3 feet. Is there anything in the middle? There is. It's called the coastal A. FEMA's not using it yet, and that's wave action between 1.5 and 3 feet. That's on the maps. You can see them on the new maps, but there is no insurance rating classification for the coastal A. I'm sure they'll work that in at some point in time. Base flood elevation is a 1% chance of floodwaters reaching that level in any given year. With the 100-year storm. So 1% chance. Another definition that you may not have heard, freeboard. What is freeboard? That's the community has the option of choosing a higher base flood elevation. So if the base flood elevation in the community is 10 and the community says we want 2 feet of freeboard, then all new homes and homes that are being elevated have to be built to 12. So the freeboard is the 2 feet of additional space. It's smart. Why would a community want freeboard? Well, one, the FEMA gives that community more discounts, more CRS points if they go with higher freeboard. And at the end of the day, it drives up the discount for all policyholders. I see that as the future. I think FEMA and communities are going to get very aggressive to get the highest discounts available. You can get up to 45%. We're nowhere near that. And I think that's important for our communities to keep pressing ahead for discounts. Because when you add up 5% of every flood premium in a community, that's big numbers. So I think that's important. We've already talked about the timeline. I'll just say this. Army Corps of Engineers are the ones who conduct the remapping. The flood maps locally were not updated in over 20 years. In Ocean City, the last update was in July of '92. The process takes approximately 5 years. So if you just think about it, the process for our local maps began in 2009. Okay, 4 years later, we have Biggert-Waters is enacted to phase in the higher rates, to bring true risk rates for everyone. 4 months later, we have Sandy. So I think a lot of our customers said, oh, are they like raising the rates because Sandy came? No, this happened 4 months before Sandy. So Sandy hits in October 29th of 2012. Then Governor Christie, rightly, I agree, required FEMA to release the data of where they were in that 5-year process so that anyone that wanted to elevate their homes knew where to go to. You know, if they didn't release that data, you just rebuild the same house, and then 2 years later, you'd be pretty upset that your home was, 2 or 3 feet below the new requirement. So I thought that was a good thing. And then obviously the maps are going to reach final adoption sometime in 2015. And that is when the insurance rates start to take effect. Not now. It's all construction related now. These maps are for construction only. Raising your home, elevating your home, or building a new home. So that's a very key point. All right. You got my little map, my doghouse up there. The way to measure is changing. This is confusing for people. The NG29 is the old way. It measures vertical elevation. from mean sea level. It was on all maps prior to the Christie maps, the ABFE maps. Essentially, what they did with the NAGVD 88 maps, which they use satellite imagery now, I'm told, it's more accurate. Essentially, the 0 on the new map is higher than the 0 on the old map. So therefore, the 10 on the new map is higher than the 10 on the old map. So if you look at it, on the old map, if your home was a 10, once the new map is released, your home now is actually 8.75. Well, if the base flood elevation is 10 in your community, you're going to be a -1. Because at 8.75, you actually round up to 9. So you're a -1, your premium's going to go up. And the way Biggert-Waters works today is once these maps are released, there's going to be a 5-year phase-in to the new rate. We don't really know what that new rate will be in 5 years, but if you're paying $1,000 for flood insurance now and you're a -1 and it goes to $1,600, you have a 5-year phase-in of that $600. That's very simply put, but that is the reality of it. In Atlantic City, the difference is about 14 inches. That 0, the old 0 to the new 0, or the old 10 to the new 10. In Atlantic City, it's about 14 inches or 1.2 feet. In Ocean City, it's 15 inches. It's like 1.25 feet. And as you move south, it actually moves to pushing 16 inches or 1.3 feet. So therefore, it's kind of hard to tell customers that call us, what's going to happen to my house when the maps are released. We go on to the website, which we think is very good, and we look at the calculations. We look at their elevation certificates. There's a lot of data. So it's really hard to pinpoint, but I haven't seen anyone really get killed because we were very lucky that a lot of people who were in the A zone did not flip into the V zone. That would have been a disaster. This meeting today would be a completely different meeting. There'd be an angry mob out there and reporters everywhere if a third of this room had homes in the V zone. So we're pretty darn lucky, and I'm going with that. The glass is half full. All right. Elevation certificates. This is the most important piece of information you can have whether you own your home or you're buying a home. Why? Because all the data on your elevation certificate is what is used to calculate a premium. Here are the things they look at. One is the zone. Are you in the A zone or the V zone? What is the elevation of your living space? In the A zone, they're using the underside of your floorboard. In the V zone, they're using the top of your floorboard. Do you have a basement or do you have a crawl space? And what is the elevation of that space under your house? What is the exterior grade, the height of the exterior grade? That's the sand around your crawl space. How high is that? You really run into a problem if the space under your house is depressed and lower than the external grade. That's called a basement. Even if it's 1 inch, FEMA calls it a basement, and you're going to pay a basement rate. So it's very important if you have a basement condition to get someone in there with some fill and rake the dirt out and bring that dirt higher to the external grade and lower that premium dramatically. Another area that we've seen is people don't have enough flood vents, or they have the old flood vents, the air vents. We all had those slider vents that we thought were great, but FEMA doesn't count them anymore. They actually stopped counting them years ago, but everyone kind of turned their head, and they don't let water through. So now all these old homes are being required to rip out those old air vents, put in flood vents, and we see a dramatic difference in premium when you have the right amount of fill under your home and the right amount of vents. And the height of your mechanicals. If you have an external condenser for your air conditioning, if that's lower than your living space, you're going to get hit with a high flood premium. So those are essentially the factors. Other than if you're in an A zone, you're allowed to have a block foundation. If you're in a V zone, you have to have piers or pilings. But again, most of the people in South Jersey did not have homes that moved from the A zone to the V zone. So that's it. I'm going to stop talking. Thank you.